Hello lovelies, welcome back again. So in today's video I'll be showing you how to make an asymmetric gather dress. So this dress doesn't have any darts sewn on it, and it also has some pleats around the shoulders, as you can see here. So you like the way it is looking, please do well to watch this video to the end. Like, share and subscribe to my channel if you haven't, and let us get on with the tutorial. So I have my patterns already drafted out here for the front and the back bodies. The tutorial for this pattern drafting has already been posted. It's the video right before this one on the channel. So if you would like to see the tutorial for that, please do well to check it out. I did not want to add that tutorial into this one so that this video doesn't get too long. So this is a very detailed dartless basic bodice pattern. I eliminated all the darts from this pattern. So please do well to check that out so that you can continue from here. Now, I don't have any allowance on this pattern paper, so I'm going to be adding all my allowances on the fabric. Now the neck width I used for the front is 4 inches, and then I used a neck depth of 3.5 inches. I curved out my armhole. I took the rest of my measurements, my bust, my waist and my hip measurements as well. And for the back bodies, I curved out my armhole as well. I used a neck width of 4 inches also, and I used a neck depth of 1.5 inches. I took the rest of my measurements, my bust measurement, waist measurement, hip measurement. I have my zipper allowance, and I also took out some inches from there to take off zipper bulge. So now to begin cutting them out on the fabric, so I'll start with the front. The front has some pleats on the shoulders, so I'm going to draw some lines from the shoulders downwards, and then I'll go on to slash those lines so that I can spread it on a fresh paper. Now placing another paper under it, I'm just going to spread it with an allowance of about half an inch between each spread. So I'm trying not to keep so much allowance so that it doesn't gape around the chest or around the bust area. So just keeping a little allowance of about 0.5 inches. I'll follow the shape of the armhole and the neckline and also the shape of the shoulders, and I'll just cut everything out this way. Now comparing the front shoulder with the back shoulder, you can see that the front shoulder is wider than the back by about 2 inches. So this is everything for the front pattern. I'll go on to cut it out now on the fabric. So for the fabric I'm using, this is crepe. It is thick and a bit stretchy on one side, and I used about 3 yards for this dress. So I'm going to go on to place the fabric on a fold, making sure that the right sides are touching. I'll bring in the front piece first, and I'm going to place the midpoint of this pattern on the folded edge of the fabric. I don't think I mentioned earlier that this pattern stops on my hip line. So my shoulder to waist is 17.5 inches and my waist to hip is 8 inches. So in total is about 25.5 inches. Now the best way to cut out an asymmetric style is by first drafting it out on paper. That's if you want to use a pattern paper for it. If you're not doing freehand, you draft out your full pattern or your full front pattern, and then after drafting out the pattern, you're going to place it on your fabric. And this time your fabric is not going to be on a fold because of course it is a full front pattern. So you're going to place your fabric flat and you place the pattern on it and you go on to just cut it out. I think that is the easiest way to do that, but here I drafted out half pattern, so I'm just going to use this half pattern to cut out my fabric on a fold, and I'm going to go on to make the asymmetric curve on the fabric itself. Now here I'm just trying to pin the paper on the fabric so that it lays very flat, and then I'll go on to add the allowances all around. So to this side I am adding an allowance of 1 inch like I said earlier, because I don't have any allowance on the paper, so I'm adding 1 inch for the sewing allowance by the side. And then to the armhole, the shoulders and the neckline, I'm going to add half an inch for sewing also. That's turning it with the interfacing. And to the lower part, that is the hip line, I'm going to add about 0.5 inches to 0.75 inches of allowance to be able to attach it to the asymmetric gathers. Now I'm just going to go on to cut everything out. Now after cutting and stopping at the hip line, I'm going to open up the fabric this way so that I can draw out the asymmetric curve. So I want the curve to start from the right side of my waistline to the left side of my hip line. So measuring down from my waist to hip on the left side, which is 8 inches, I'm going to just make a slant from the right side of my waist down to the left side of my hip. I'll just mark down 8 inches right here on the left side, and I'm going to add about 0.75 inches for joining allowance. And now on my waistline, the right side, I'm going to come down by about 0.75 inches also for joining allowance. That is to attach it to the gathers. So I'm going to use my ruler now to just slant from the waistline to the hip line. So I'm slanting from one allowance to the other allowance. I'm using my straight ruler first, and then I'm just going to come in with my curve ruler and make make a very slight curve because I don't want it to be too straight. So I'm making the curve toward the hip point right there. I'm just going to make a little curve like this, and then I'll proceed to just cut it out. So also take note that all these markings are on the right side of this fabric. It was just easier for me to do it this way. Now I'm done cutting that, I'll go on to trim off a little from the neckline because it was looking a bit too pointy. So I'm trimming off about 0.25 inches from the neckline. This does not affect the neck width and neck depth, so it's just the part around, just the curve around the neckline. Now to cut out the back, I place my fabric on a fold again. Now I'm going to place my pattern paper on it and I'll pin it down. I'll go on to add allowances all around. I'm adding 1 inch to the side and 0.5 inches to the armholes, the shoulder and the neckline, and I'm going to add about 0.75 inches below the hip line, and I'll go on to cut it out. After cutting out the back pieces, I'll open it up to the right side and I'm going to place zipper allowance on zipper allowance. So the zipper allowance is 1.25 inches. So I'm just going to make sure that I have exactly 1.25 inches on top of 1.25 inches this way. I'm just going to use my pins to hold it in place. I'll do that accurately from top to bottom, and then I'm going to go on to place the front piece on the back piece. Now I'm placing them right sides facing each other, and I'm using the front piece as a landmark to cut out the same asymmetric shape for the back. So you're just going to make sure you place them right sides together if you're doing it this way. I'll pin the sides and I'm going to just follow the shape this way and cut the back piece out. Now I'm done cutting that out. You can see we don't need this little piece anymore, so I'll place that aside and I'm going to go on to take off the pin so that we can separate the front from the back. Now for the zipper allowance area, don't be scared that one side will be longer than the other. By the time you fold in the zipper allowance, when you sew it in, everything is just going to lap rightly, as you can see. Now that is all for the front and back bodies. To cut out the gathers, the length of the gathers I'm working with is 28 inches. So this length measurement is from the waist downwards and not from the hip downwards. You know, this is an asymmetric line, so one part starts from the waist and the other part ends at the hip. So the length of these gathers is measuring from the waist downwards. I hope you understand. By the time I am done, one side is still going to be longer than the other side and I'm going to eventually trim it off, but for now I'm working with a length of 28 inches. Now for the width, I'm going to measure the entire distance of this asymmetric line from the waist down to the hip this way. What I have here is about 23 inches. This is just for the front, so the back is also going to be 23 inches excluding the zipper allowance. Now I'm going to multiply this 23 inches by about 3. This is what you can do, but what I eventually sewed mine with was about 3.5 yards. So I used about 3.5 yards to sew the gathers all around. That's for the front and the back. So this is the fabric I have cut out here for the gathers with a length of 28 inches and a width of 3.5 yards. Now I'm going to cut out the interfacing. I'm going to place a piece of fabric on a fold. I'm starting with the back pieces. I'm going to just follow the exact shape of the back and the length is just going to go a little below the armhole. So after cutting out the back piece this way and separating it into 2 separate pieces, I'm going to go on to cut out the front. So for the front, I'll first of all sew a gather stitch on the shoulders of the front because as you can see, the front shoulder is wider than the back because of the slash and spread I did around that area. So I'll gather up the shoulders to reduce the width before turning it with the interfacing, but for now I'm just going to use my pins to reduce the size first. So the width of the shoulders is about 4.6 inches. So taking a landmark from the back shoulders, it's about 4.6 inches including the allowance. So I'm just going to use my pins to reduce it to about 4.6 inches. I'll place the fabric for the interfacing on a fold. I'm just going to confirm the shoulders here again, and I'm also going to confirm my neck width of 4 inches. I'll follow the shape of the armhole, the shoulders and the neckline, and I'm going to cut it out. After cutting it out, I'll trim off a little from the interfacing this way, and time to attach the interfacing with the main fabric. I'm going to place them right sides together and I'll fully enclose the armholes and the neckline. And for the back, I'm going to place the interfacing on the back piece right sides facing, and I'm going to sew only the neckline of this back piece, so just the neckline of the back. Now this is the front after sewing the neckline and the armholes. You can see the little pleats I have here on the shoulders after making my gathers. And for the back here, you can see that I sewed only the neckline. Now I'm going to go on to just notch the areas I have sewn, and I'll turn it over to the right side. Now I'll proceed to give it a very good press, and then I'll attach the front and the back together. So this is it after ironing. Now I'll place the back on the front right side facing so that I can join the shoulders. So I'll also fully enclose the shoulders, and to do that I'll use the interfacing of the back piece. I'll turn it over to cover the shoulders of the front and the back piece placed together this way, and then I'm going to make a straight stitch on the shoulder. Now I'm also going to fully enclose the armhole of the back. So by the time I sew a straight stitch on the shoulder, when I get to the side, you can see that I still have a little allowance right there. So I'm going to use that allowance to fully enclose the armhole of the back. So I'm basically sewing the main fabric of the back piece on the lining just around the armhole right there. So just like I did for the front, sewing the armholes together, the armhole of the lining and the main fabric, is the same thing I'm going to do here for the back. So I'll place the shoulders together, front and back, right side facing. I'll turn over the interfacing of the back to enclose the front and the back shoulders. I'll sew a straight stitch on the shoulders, and then with the leftover allowance, I'm going to sew from the shoulders into the armhole to the side. I really hope you understand what I am saying. Now I'm done sewing it, I'll go on to just trim off the excesses I have around the shoulders. I'll trim off the edges so it can lay a bit flat by the time I turn it over. I'll make some notches around the armhole I have just sewn, and then I'm going to turn it over to the right side. You can see how fully enclosed the shoulders are. They're looking so neat. So if you don't want to go through the hassle of doing this, you can also use a bias to neatly turn in the armhole. Now I'm going to go on to give this a good press so that I can shape up the sides. So this is it here after ironing. I'm going to be using 1 inch of allowance to shape up the sides. So you can remember 1 inch is the sewing allowance I added when I was cutting out the paper on the fabric. So this is it here after sewing the sides with 1 inch of allowance from the armhole downwards. Now I'll bring in the fabric I cut out for the gathers, and I'll go on to run a gather stitch on the top, and I'm going to gather it to fit the width of the asymmetric half cut. So I'm going to measure from one zipper opening to the other zipper opening at the center back, and what I have all around there is about 44 inches. So I'm going to gather up the lower piece to about 44 inches. I'll take it to my machine, I'll run a gather stitch, and I'll gather it up to 44 inches. And this is it after gathering it up. I'm going to place the upper bodice open this way, and I will sew from one zipper allowance opening. As you can see, I did not gather the zipper allowance part. I'm going to just sew it this way to the other zipper allowance opening, making sure that they are placed right sides together. After joining the gathers with the upper bodice, this is what I have here. Now it's time to attach my zipper. So I'm using an invisible zipper for this, and I also want to fully enclose the zipper allowance area. So I'm going to first of all sew the zip on the main fabric, opening up the interfacing this way. I'll just attach the zipper the normal way, and then I'm going to use the interfacing of the back piece. I'll place it over, I'll place the right side of the interfacing on the wrong side of the zipper, which is placed on the right side of the fabric, and I'm just going to fully enclose it. So you can just skip this step and attach your zipper like you normally do, and then you can go on to nicely overlock the raw edges of your fabric. So attach the zipper from the neck depth at the center back downwards to a bit below the joining. Now we're almost done. The next thing I'm going to do is to trim off the lower part. So like I said earlier, I was going to trim off this lower part because I don't want the gathers to also be asymmetric. I just want the upper bodice to be asymmetric. So the length of the hip line is what is making this dress asymmetric. So you know that it starts on the waistline on the right side and it goes down to the hip line. So that is what is making one side longer than one. So my waist to hip is 8 inches, and that waist to hip measurement is only taken on the left side. So I'm going to take off that 8 inches from the lower part, that's from the gathers fabric. I'm just going to go up by 8 inches on the left side, and I'm going to trim it to meet the right side so that everything can be equal. You can decide to leave it asymmetric like this, it also looks nice, or you can also go on to trim it off like I did so that you can have it straight at the lower part. Now after trimming it, I went on to hem the ends. I'll also go on to overlock the insides, and this is everything for this dress. I ironed it nicely, and you can see the little pleats on the shoulders, and this is the final outlook. I added a line of black bead just to give it a little pop because the fabric was looking too plain. So this is everything for this dress. Thank you so much for watching. Please do well to like, share and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.